Good morning. Welcome to Communications Week with New York Women in Communications. I'm Judith Harrison, immediate past president and senior vice president of diversity and inclusion at Weber Shandwick. I am so delighted to be sitting here virtually with 2020 Matrix Award honoree Linda Yaccarino, chairman of Global Advertising and Partnerships at NBCUniversal. I hope all of you were able to watch the Matrix Awards last Monday, October 12th. It was the first time NYWICI, otherwise known as New York Women in Communications, held our flagship event virtually. And I have to say, it was a wonderful celebration of 50 years of iconic women who have changed the world with their commitment to create, connect, and give back. Linda was on fire. Her authenticity, her passion, her commitment to lifting up other women were front and center, and seconded by her incredible team of presenters. I have to tell you, I have never seen anything like it. It was basically every news star you can imagine at NBC and their satellite networks. Beyond awesome. If you haven't seen it, check it out at NYWICI.org, where you can see the entire Matrix Awards event and read stories about the honorees in the online event journal. You will be so glad you did. Linda and I are here today to talk about the future of television in light of the sweeping cultural awakening taking place around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are in a period like no other. The deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, in what felt like unbearably quick succession, created a massive cultural awakening to longstanding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. New and widespread acknowledgement of the systemic equality that has been embedded in the infrastructure of our institutions and woven into our social fabric for hundreds of years sparks widespread, long-lasting protests here and around the world. The moment of raised consciousness that we are in now can and must be an inflection point, not just a moment in time that comes and goes. The enormous structural and cultural change across the country, around the world, across every business, and inside every individual demands reflection, intention, and action to change the issues that we know have been ignored for far too long. So with that, let's dive in. I'd like to start by talking with Linda, and first congratulating you, Linda, on your new promotion as Chairman, Global Advertising and Partnerships that was announced last week. You have gone from leading NBC's advertising division to now leading a global business. So when you look back on all of these accomplishments, and there are so many, is there something or someone that motivated you to keep pushing?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me today. It is quite an honor to be here. I hope I can keep up with you, but I appreciate it so much. And I'm still kind of floating a little bit from last week's awards, because for so many years, I've sat in the audience and admired the women who have had the opportunity to share in such a great honor. So it was a little bit of a, kind of pinch me moment for me. So I just want to thank you so much.
Oh,
And
so welcome.
as it relates to your question, is there something that, keeps me going or keep pushing me? When I think back and say, how do I look back on all the accomplishments throughout my career? I suppose the drive or the energy to keep moving forward started way back when I was growing up with my parents. And I come from a very old-fashioned Italian family, which I say with a lot of love. And I'm one of three girls. And I suppose way back then, my dad probably had dreams of having a son, but he didn't. And he decided to take the ball and run with it. So my sisters and I grew up in an environment that knew no boundaries. You can do anything, be anything you want to be. Let's just develop a game plan to how to get there, right? So I went away to college, and I thought everybody grew up like that. And when I got out of my little Italian family bubble and I went to school, I realized that not everybody had the same opportunity that I had to get to where I was and feeling strong and confident and feeling like I could conquer the world, but specifically to some types of people who had certain types of backgrounds, they were more compromised than others. So what happened when I started my career, I knew really early on, and specifically early in my career, it was all about women, was that they didn't enter college or enter a workplace where they had a boundaryless view of what could be accomplished. So as every step I took in my career, I leaned on a lot of my network of people. It started out with my family, my sisters, now my daughter, and we all try to push each other forward because there's a lot more work to be done. But I made a commitment early on was to help keep building my network of people that actually needed my voice. If my voice had the opportunity to be in different rooms or to be louder, and many of those rooms, I was the only woman in the room, then whoever came after me would hopefully have an easier time of it. So I think it was the early way I grew up, and then actually realizing that was a little bit naive to think that everyone had that opportunity to think boundaryless, and then you would be welcome. So I have to say, I use that experience as a good fortune, but also a very sobering reminder that as far as we've come, we have a long way to go.
So true. You're so lucky to have had that background. That's a wonderful way to start out in life. I'm going to take the conversation in a slightly different direction and talk about the industry a bit. So, as we know, workplace culture does not exist in a vacuum. Culture is driven by human beings. So, my question is, how do the stories we tell ourselves through advertising and media impact our views and our behavior both inside and outside the office?
Well, it's really interesting question when you say that the workplace culture doesn't exist in a vacuum, but culture is driven by humans, or let's say citizens. We can talk about it in terms of, in context of this country right now. And I really do think that maybe 7 months ago, maybe a workplace culture did exist in a vacuum, right? Or certainly wasn't in sync. Culture wasn't standing shoulder to shoulder, right? With the same vision of what your workplace should look like and who are the people you were trying to serve. So right now, there's, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, there's massive structural and cultural change going on across the country, across every industry, and deep inside every person. We are never going to be the same as we were 7 months ago, whether it's the health crisis we immediately confronted together or a social crisis that we're also confronting together. So imagine that, those two things bringing us together to partner to try to change. I think for a company like NBC Universal and every media company, the opportunity that we have through advertising and media to mobilize what's right, it cannot be underscored. Imagine that, whether it's advertising or content, it's a medium of sight, sound, motion, which creates emotion, right? So you have the ability to win the hearts of people, to change their minds, but really shape the cultural zeitgeist. And I think the two things, the unimaginable things, from the health pandemic to the social pandemic, let's call it that, is actually pushing us, that the advertising and media industry actually has found a higher calling that says we can impact and change the way people think, feel, because we can impact what they see. And people want to see a world that they want to live in. And I think that is really incredible, that we have the opportunity now to never do what we were doing 7 months ago, but knew we needed to change for decades. And now you have the permission to just go do it.
I love that. Absolutely love it. It is so true. And to that point, you know, as we've said, 2020 has been a year of social awakenings on a scale like we have never seen. So diversity, equity, and inclusion issues have been brought to the forefront, and companies are looking at all of their policies and all of their processes around hiring and talent development and training and all sorts of things, um, and so much more. And so similar moments of raised consciousness have happened sort of on and off throughout the years, and then they've just gone away instead of creating permanent change. So what, if anything, have you seen at this time that's different from previous moments? Uh, can you tell us about any promising changes you've seen? And I think most importantly, how can we ensure that elevating the voices of women and people of color and people with disabilities and other underrepresented people, and they all intersect because nobody is just one thing, how can they become an enduring part of our industry and our culture?
Well, that's a very big question with a lot of sub questions in there, but it's a very big
Yes.
topic. It's a very big topic. So I think you're absolutely right that historically these things have come in and out of fashion, and then maybe just kind of chugged along, but weren't prioritized. And what I'd like to talk about a word that we use consistently now in my division and at my company, and that's intentional, right? And I think that every person, whether you are in leadership or you are a brand new employee, has to be intentional about the culture that you want to contribute to, that you want to be in. I think the sophistication and the opportunity for everyone to have a voice via social media or via communication mechanisms at almost every company, where employees have the opportunity to feel safe and to speak their voice, right? So I think those things combined with an awakening that there was so much more work to do because of what, you know, was caused, this eruption that was caused. I can talk about, you know, things that my company is doing to accelerate, right? To accelerate what we were doing already, but realizing that it wasn't enough. So what immediately started happening was that under the leadership of Brian Roberts and Jeff Shell, Comcast set up a fund to the value of $100 million to fight social justice and equality, and obviously supporting many important groups. But it really made a very public statement that we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're not going anywhere. And it inspired action across every corner of our company, because what it also did was made leadership of our company accountable. We have this $100 million. What are you doing? What's the update? Where are you with that? But it also gave a lot of us opportunity to say, here's our update. How can you help? What do you think we should be doing, right? So I think it's very exciting. And there's been a lot of exciting steps of progress at our company. Because for a lot of companies, we needed to take a moment and actually open our aperture. I'll use maybe a TV or a film reference to say, okay, we thought we were doing enough. Clearly we weren't. So then we had to make sure we were taking the right steps to direct funds towards the right organizations, to make a public statement of accountability, like Cesar Conde, our new chairman of news, who made a public statement that was confronting editorial bias and saying, my division, our news division, the biggest news division in the country, is going to be 50% women and 50% people of color. Ambitious goals? Yes, no doubt about it. But a statement, a stake in the ground with accountability. And I'm happy to say there's many other examples of progress at our company, divisions like mine, working with Add Color and T. Howard Foundation. So there's so many examples of us trying to listen, learn, but do. And I'll say the do, I'll say where our goal is really to be intentional about when we go back and give those report outs, that we're accountable and and we can report progress and that we're proud of what we're doing. So I think it's an exciting time that's come out of such adversity for so many people.
I absolutely love what you said. You have used two of my all-time favorite words, intentional and accountable. Because if you're not intentional about doing all of these things and making these changes, and you think, well, you know, one of these days when I have some time, I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
And if nobody is accountable, nothing happens. So everything that you said is right on the money in terms of, in my view, in terms of how things should be done. And it is wonderful that your organization has made this pledge to become 50% women and 50% people of color. Awesome. Kudos to you and the team. That is wonderful. I want to move to something that is personal to you. And that is on Sunday, October 11th, International Day of the Girl, you led a social celebration campaign called #She'sMine that centers around celebrating and lifting up women. So can you take us through how you developed this campaign, #She'sMine, what it means to you, and why it's such an important part of the diversity and inclusion conversation?
Well, thank you. I might keep everyone here all day because you're right. #She'sMine is deeply, deeply personal to me. And how it came about was actually months and months ago when we originally thought that the Matrix Awards was going to be in May, right? And we started talking about I started talking about with my team what I wanted my remarks to be about. And we were brainstorming, and really what it came about was, while this was an award that I was fortunate to be receiving, my whole progression to get here was about how I had so many people selflessly helping me and teaching me and nurturing me, and that I found it crazy not to talk about the influence of others that they had on me, whether they helped me or whether they wanted me to be better or do better so I could help them, right? So that's kind of was the basic inspiration of #She'sMine, because there were so many people in my life who taught me and helped me along the way that I couldn't narrow down just a small group of people, or that one person did just one thing to me. And it inspired this great idea that, oh my gosh, I bet if we got it out there, right? If we put it on every social media platform, if I went to all my marketing partners and said, who is she to you? How unbelievable would it be? Oh, and someone on the team said, and you know that the Matrix Awards are the day after the International Day of the Girl. And then the thing just exploded and took on a life of its own. And Instagram partnered with us. Most major companies, Delta Airlines partnered with us. And I could go on through 20 other companies, and it kind of just started spreading, because whether it was your mom, and my mom is still flipping out because I called her my own personal Kris Jenner. Okay. And
I love it. I love it.
It was hilarious. It was hilarious. but she is that influential in my life, and you don't really step out of line for Isabel Yaccarino. That being said, it took on a life of its own because you had the opportunity. For example, even Snap created a Snap filter for #She'sMine, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people used it to be able to tell people in their own way what they meant to, what any woman meant to them, the particular woman. And can you imagine? I mean, it's literally in the tens of millions right now, whether it was Twitter, Instagram, Snap, of women who for a few minutes that day or the next following days, because it's continuing, got a smile on their face or a recognition of some contribution they made to someone else. And I can't tell you, as I told you, I'll stop talking now because I could keep everyone on for days, but we've actually been approached. I've been approached whether could She's My become a mentorship program? Could it be a podcast? Could it be a
Oh,
leadership?
wow.
So I'm like, my head is still spinning. It's so great. And progress can come out of good as well. And I think when we come together with a simple idea that basically was make someone's day, tell them what she meant to you, it could be a great thing too. And there's a lot of momentum. So thank you for asking.
My pleasure. It is such a simple, beautiful, powerful idea. I love it. And there are a lot of people that I could put on my list. So you're making me think a lot, and that's always,
Well,
always.
that was the goal. So thank you.
Oh gosh, of course. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit again. We mentioned the pandemic, and obviously that has had quite an impact on media and entertainment. And so, in your mind, have there been any positive changes in terms of the way we work because of the pandemic?
Well, there's been a lot of changes to the way we work, and it's really been fascinating to watch as, virtually our entire industry was either initially put on pause or transition to working from home, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you immediately saw how things changed because of the conditions under which people had to adapt
Right.
to work from home or work virtually. And every organization needed to commit to servicing or supporting their employees, keeping them healthy, keeping them safe, but also supporting them in their work from home situation. And a lot of that combined with the things that we're talking about created a situation where you had to confront support or take action in those people who were more compromised than others,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there are people who are more compromised at this time than others in underrepresented communities, right?
Exactly.
In people who don't have the luxury of having help for their children or having help
Mm-hmm.
for their parents, right? So we had to keep a very, very close eye on what kind of different support did we need to give our employees during this time. And I think it was also simultaneous to what we had committed to promoting in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and get better at that and bring more people into our organization that had a voice. And I work really closely with our head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at our company. And I'm smiling just because he's been one of my closest friends since I walked in the door about 9 years ago to NBCU. And I'm so proud of him, of all the efforts he's leading on behalf of Comcast and NBCU. And he always, I quote him all the time because a lot of people say, who do you know, right? And he
Mm-hmm.
always corrects everyone and says, you should start asking, who should we know? Which inspires
Love it.
every single person at our company into action and gives them a responsibility to broaden our diversity base, but also if you can inspire your whole company into action, then you're going to get to where you want to go a lot faster, right?
Exactly.
So it also challenges legacy things that we've limited or done away with, like limiting legacy programs for executive referrals. It tends to be people who
Love
all
it.
look the same and will all have the same background,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or increasing relocation packages to get people who don't have the means to move. Now, who knows with work from home, but strengthen those programs to get people to consider it, and offering student loan assistance. Those things weren't even thought about as something that could help, because in this time, in where we are, you have permission to throw out the whole playbook and change. Because during the last 7 months, I've been, on these endless calls, one after the next, but talking to a lot of CMOs and CEOs who are our customers, and all of us agree on one thing. There's not even a discussion. It's our companies will never look the same again. It's not that we won't look the same as before the pandemic. We'll never look the same again. So these efforts to bring in people who not only look different and have different backgrounds culturally, but they have different professional experiences. That's what drives innovation. And there is reams and reams of data, no matter what moments of time you're living in, is that innovation is good for business. So it's that simple. The more people who look different, come from different backgrounds, but also have different professional experience, those are the companies that are going to win, because that's what drives innovation. And that's what affects the bottom line. Because who wants to do the same old thing you did every other day and every other year in the way you used to do it?
Right. And those companies that are actually looking at this and seeing that it's got to be a diverse workforce operating in an inclusive environment to get that advantage of innovation. And
you're right, there is no leader or no business report or data that will tell you that isn't good for business. It's
exactly. And so I'm so glad that people are seeing that. I know that people would want to know what they can do in their own companies to drive the change that we all want and need to see. So this has been great in terms of what you're doing, what your company is doing. Everybody wants to contribute. So what can people do to make a difference?
I think it touches upon a couple of comments that I made a few minutes ago about every single person, no matter what your level, no matter what your role, has the capacity to lead. So even if you are just getting out of college, you come into a workforce environment, you have the opportunity to be a leader of your peers, and also a leader, so you are looked upon to, accelerate your career path. That being said, you're also given opportunities now more than ever to speak your voice, right? You have an opportunity to check in with your moral compass. What doesn't feel right with that moral compass, you have the opportunity to surface and talk about it more now than ever. But you also have the opportunity to be brave, right? And to do something courageous. And initially, and I'll talk on behalf of my team and my division, especially at the start of this pandemic, I told my team there were two things we were doing. Number one, we had to make sure that everyone was safe and healthy and working from home and had what they needed. But the second thing was make sure, coming out on the other side of this pandemic, that our consumers and our marketing partners said NBCUniversal was the greatest thing that I had during the pandemic. They spoke to me, they inspired me, they were there for me, they helped me when it might not have been best for their business. And an example of that early on was, it had to be, I don't even think it was 2 weeks into the pandemic. And it was a call on a Thursday that I got from the Ad Council, one of my greatest partners, Lisa Sherman, the CEO, Matrix winner. She was my hashtag, she's my do good for the world partner. Okay. I love it. I was so excited to talk about that. But they called, Lisa called me, and she asked me if NBCUniversal would be interested in working with the CDC and the White House to get out to every media platform in the industry the tools and the educational communication that every person in this country needed during the early days of the pandemic. And that was If you're 65 or older, you could be at risk. If you have diabetes, you could be at risk. Social distancing is important. Wash your hands, right? So I'm talking about some things that now we all really know, but in the early days, we didn't know.
That's right.
And over a 3-day period, it went from a Thursday to a Monday, we worked around the clock to supply the needed media toolkit to educate every consumer in the country. And we sent it out to every media organization. It didn't matter. Didn't matter if it was Google, Facebook, Viacom, CBS, because there was an opportunity for the greater good, opportunity for a higher calling to then you just looked at, said, you know what? This is the right thing to do. Good will come. Good will come of it, but the American people came first. And that was such an exciting thing that I have to say, in past, I'm not sure it could have been accomplished, because it was such a, what turned out to be such an incredibly unifying event, unifying initiative, but it wasn't looked on as one company would be the benefactor to all companies. And that was one of the moments that you stood and said, I'm doing the right thing. It might not be the easy thing, I'm doing the right thing. And that was exciting. And I can tell you the impact on our team and our culture and our company was amazing, amazing, and worth every single of that. Well, I don't know if my whole team that spent 72 hours of sleepless nights, but it was worth it.
I love that idea of doing well by doing good. I think that is so important. And I feel that sometimes people become really cynical about that. But in my estimation, it's critical.
Absolutely.
And it is the best thing for everyone. So I so appreciate your talking about that, and more than that, doing it. So with that, I think I want to just thank you so much for having this conversation. It has been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And I just want to take a few minutes to open up the floor to questions, because I know that there are some questions that have come in through our chat box. So the first one that comes to mind, and I can actually read this without my glasses, I am so shocked, I don't even know what to say. But there's a question for both of us here. And it says, are there best practices that you've learned about your career? What has helped you in your journey to the top that you would recommend that other people do?
Well, there are some best practices. I will say I have consciously set out to develop a diversity of experiences, right? Mm-hmm. So when I started out in programming, or I started out in research, I quickly moved to programming. Then I moved to the advertising piece of the world, but they were all in different business sectors. And back then things weren't as converged. So it was local television to national syndication to then a giant jump at the time to cable. And even when I came to NBCUniversal and I added some marketing responsibilities to my purview, it wasn't really in vogue in the time to be doing a broadcast, cable, digital all at once. But because my previous history had experience in all pieces of the content business or the media business and advertising, if you will, it enabled me to kind of push the company forward at the time, NBCUniversal, and bring all of our assets together for a better offering to customer. So I would tell people, don't stay in your lane. Don't be typecast into one role, and really think about broadening your experience. Because when you're able to have such a diverse skill set, you're able to form your own opinions and think about people who want to be leaders. When you're able to touch upon different disciplines, different types of organizations you've had experience, you become a much more dynamic leader, and you're able to draw upon those experience. And I think nowadays, which also even more exciting, is that we enjoy in my team, even in inviting people or hiring people who aren't necessarily in the media business, right? So bring another diverse skill set to us, because if you have the eyes and ears of a good piece of our customer, I can teach you about media math. We can teach you about advertising, but we can't teach you the experience of the voice of the customer or the consumer that you have. So I think
Right.
now more than ever, a diversity of experience is more sought after and widely accepted. And I think that's an exciting time.
Love it. I could not agree more. And I will build on that just from my own personal experience. That diversity of experience has been important to me. It has not been as wide ranging as yours, but it's been interesting in that I've done a number of things. I was a PR practitioner. I then went into talent acquisition and human resources within the communication space, and created the diversity and inclusion position, and basically the idea in the industry that we needed to have a dedicated person for that, because I saw the opportunity. I just thought it's time. We absolutely need to have someone to do this. So from my perspective, one of the things that's most important, aside from getting that wide range of experience, is bringing your whole authentic self to the table, which I know some people are kind of shy about that. They hesitate to do that. But I will tell you that my life changed once I decided to do that, and once I really brought who I truly am to bear. So it wasn't about trying to model myself after someone else. It was about, who am I? What is important to me? What impact do I want to have on the world? And that impact for me is opening doors for women, people of color, and other underrepresented folks. So once that crystallized, then it just seemed like a world of opportunities opened up. And I would also say that connecting with people is incredibly important. So join organizations, and I'm not saying this just to push NYWICI, which I obviously adore, but I'm saying it because you never ever know where you're going to meet the people that you will connect with, who will be able to help you in your career and who will become friends for life. So I think that when you look at your whole life holistically, there isn't this huge divide between work and the rest of it. It's all kind of a piece. So my advice is, learn everything you can, get all the experience you can, and be exactly who you are, and understand that that has value. And you figure out how to articulate that value and bring it to what you do. So there's my big advice.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Now I do have to put on my glasses to see another question. Okay, so here's one. Good morning, ladies. As a Ben Stanford member, I don't necessarily feel as though the communication about the $100 million initiative has been as transparent as they might want. So how can we get a better line of communication to senior executive leadership, who are the ultimate executives or the ultimate decision makers when it comes to social justice initiatives? So that is a question that has come up here.
Well, I'm curious if it's specifically a question for Comcast and the transparency of the progress that we're making with our $100 million commitment. And one thing that Brian Roberts has specifically communicated is transparency is key, and the foundation of everything we do here at this company, but specifically with this effort. And that's why I mentioned Craig Robinson, who has taken on broader roles of the company that is leading these efforts to not only identify organizations that we're supporting, but also directing funds towards organizations like the National Urban League, Equal Justice, so et cetera. There's many companies. And as recently as last Tuesday, I think it was last week, Brian Roberts talked about the initiatives going forward in the company and the need for everyone to participate. Now, the actual progress we're making with the funds and the impact of the allocations of those funds are going to be forthcoming, right? They're months old. But also, I have to talk about the installation of D&I leadership across every group at the company, educational programming on topics like implicit bias and intersectionality and allyship, all
Right.
in motion. I said earlier in my talks that there's action are going on around every corner of the company. So I think you have to look at what a company is doing holistically.
Yep.
And I think while the money is super important, but radically rethinking our entire corporate culture is really an acute need, and we're addressing that head on. And I am really, really proud of the progress that we're making so far. So more to come on that.
I love it. And I could not agree more that while it is really important for companies to make these commitments to social justice, it is equally important to transform from within. And that is hard. That is, it's not something where people just snap their fingers and say, aha, we are transformed. So there are all sorts of factors that go into it, including training and including a tremendous amount of self-examination, setting up guidelines and metrics and all sorts of things to make sure that we are making progress. And it is a journey. It's not something that is right around the corner. Next week, we will be able to report that we are in nirvana. Not yet.
And that's why I think it's super important that every single person plays a role.
Exactly.
Right? Every single person plays a role, particularly not only as we're addressing all these social issues, but we're coming out of a pandemic where unemployment was, it was double digits, right? So
Yep.
when you have the opportunity to hire people, I'll give you an example. One of the new programs that NBCU has installed over the last year was called returnships. And it was specifically designed for people who aren't aware of what it is. It was specifically designed to reach out into the unemployed community for people who had left their careers to either raise children or to take care of their aging parents, right? And into those underemployed communities and bring them back in. The biggest obstacle to that was that they weren't trained. So what you needed to do was develop a program that reskilled or upskilled these very qualified people, but they had many years of being out of the workforce. So skilling was kind of out of grasp to them.
Right.
So one of the programs that I'm really, really proud of and that my division is aggressively embracing are these returnships. Because when you're able to reach into the underemployed communities, it's very, very often those people who need the help most, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So the people that we're talking about, which are the diverse community that we want to enlighten and broaden our culture. And you can talk specifically to women too, but it can be women of color. So those are the communities that the people who first lean in and say, I have to take care of my babies or I have to take care of my parents, that we want to make sure that they have opportunities to get back in when they're ready.
I love it. That is absolutely brilliant and so important, and I think will be really impactful. We have time for one last question. I'm going to throw this one to you because I actually inadvertently answered it already. And the question here is basically what do you want your legacy to be? What impact do you want to have left on the world?
I would love to say that I'd love for my legacy to be that, I worked in an industry that was exciting and fun and so lucky to be able to deal with brands that inspired so many people, right? Consumers who interacted with the Olympics, interacted with their favorite sport team. Think about the yelling and screaming that you do because you're so passionate about it. But I'd like to say that in my career, I made a conscious effort to take that good fortune of all those luxury brands that I get to work with and use them and redirect them for good. So whether it was inspiring my teams over time, taking the effort to make sure young people had a good roadmap for what's next to them, or for people to say, like, I actually remembering now that in my remarks for Matrix, that someone would say that, if they were talking about me at the end of my career, they would say that she's my, or she was my champion. So that's really what I'd like it to be.
What a great way to end this conversation. I thank you again so much, Linda, for being part of this conversation. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it. I really appreciate everyone who has come in to listen, learn, share their opinion to whatever extent. I think that conversations like this are extraordinarily important.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a really, truly a treat. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Linda. Take care, and thank you, everyone. So appreciate it. Have a great day.
Great day.